The 1st of September, 1939. After a false accusation that the Poles attacked a German radio station, Nazi Germany launches a retaliatory campaign against Poland, triggering World War II. After defeating the Polish army, the Germans ruthlessly suppress the Poles, whom they consider to be racially inferior. And in the weeks following the German attack on Poland, German SS, police, and military units shoot thousands of Polish civilians, including many members of the Polish nobility, clergy, and intelligentsia. In the fall of 1941, Nazi Germany begins to implement a plan codenamed Operation Reinhard to systematically murder almost 2 million Jews living in the German-administered territory of occupied Poland called the General Government. 3 killing centers are established as part of this plan: Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. One of the main perpetrators of this operation, who for his cruelty will become known as the Angel of Death of Treblinka, is August Miete. August Wilhelm Miete was born on the 1st of November 1908 in Westerkappeln, then part of the German Empire. Miete was the son of a miller and farmer, and after finishing elementary school, he followed in his father's footsteps and learnt the miller handicraft. After his father died in 1921, together with his brother, Miete worked on the family farm and as a grinder in the flour mill. He got married and had 3 children. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. At the beginning of the following year, Miete joined the Nazi Party and showed an interest in becoming a settler in the East and asked about it at his local agricultural chamber. The local Münster Agricultural Chamber advised Miete about a job at Grafeneck Euthanasia Center. He accepted an offer to work on the farm that was attached to Grafeneck and soon became involved in the T-4 Euthanasia Program. The Nazi Euthanasia Program, codenamed T-4, was the systematic murder of institutionalized patients with disabilities in Germany. The original plan was to kill people by injecting narcotics until it was realized that these would cause loss of consciousness, but death would not occur for some time. An alternative suggestion was made to use carbon monoxide gas. Patients were transported by bus or by rail to one of the central gassing installations for killing. Within hours of their arrival at such centers, the victims were murdered in gas chambers. The gas chambers, disguised as shower facilities, used pure, bottled carbon monoxide gas. T4 functionaries burned the bodies in crematoria attached to the gassing facilities. Other workers took the ashes of cremated victims from a common pile and placed them in urns to send to the relatives of the victims. The families or guardians of the victims received such an urn, along with a death certificate and other documentation listing a fictitious cause and date of death. The most infamous of the killing centers was Hadamar. Miete came to Hadamar in October 1941 and worked as a stoker, that is, one who removed corpses from the gas chambers, broke out gold teeth, burned the bodies, and performed other tasks around the gas chambers and crematoria. When in the summer of 1941, the staff celebrated the cremation of their 10,000th patient, they celebrated with beer and wine. Since the crematorium ovens were often filled with 2 corpses at a time, the cremation process was less than perfect, which often resulted in a thick, acrid smog that hung over the town. The euthanasia program continued until the last days of World War II and claimed the lives of 250,000 individuals. At the end of June 1942, Miete was transferred to Nazi-occupied Poland to take part in Operation Reinhard and was dispatched to Treblinka extermination camp. Treblinka was constructed in the summer of 1942 and was the 3rd killing center after Belzec and Sobibor, established by Operation Reinhard authorities. Deportations to Treblinka came mainly from the ghettos of Warsaw and Radom districts in the General Government and continued until the spring of 1943. Most prominent among the deportations were the approximately 7,000 Jews transported from the Warsaw Ghetto after its liquidation following the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 1943. A Holocaust survivor, Józef Czarny, whose parents died in the Warsaw Ghetto, remembered after the war how at the age of 16, he was transferred to Treblinka, where he spent 10 months. When the Ukrainian Trawniki guards came to lock the door, they used a board to push in the mass of flesh. We were crushed, crammed together, absolutely stuck together as one flesh. I remember some people going stark raving mad. They were drinking urine. They actually did that, Czarny added, and broke down crying. He later continued, "I remember Hannah and Gita, two of my 3 sisters, crying out, 'Daddy, Daddy,' but I couldn't find them." While Josef survived Treblinka, his 3 sisters were murdered there immediately after arrival. At Treblinka, the process of selection and murder was carefully planned and organized. Incoming trains of about 50 or 60 cars bound for the killing center first stopped at the Malkinia railway station. 20 cars at a time were detached from the train and brought into the killing center. The guards ordered the victims to disembark in the reception area, which contained the railway siding and platform. One building erected on the platform was disguised as a railway station, complete with a wooden clock, timetables, destination signs, and even a fake ticket office. German SS and police personnel announced that the deportees had arrived at a transit camp and they were required to hand over all valuables. The reception area contained a fenced-in deportation square, with 2 barracks in which deportees, with men separated from women and children, had to undress. It also contained large storerooms. This is where the possessions relinquished by victims were sorted and stored before being shipped to Germany via Lublin. A camouflaged fenced-in path led from the reception area to the gas chamber, located in the killing area. This was known as the tube. Victims were forced to run naked along this path to gas chambers, deceptively labeled as showers. Once the chamber doors were sealed, a large diesel engine installed outside the building pumped in carbon monoxide exhaust fumes. Within 25 minutes at the most, all lay stretched down dead, or to be more accurate, were standing up dead, since there was not an inch of free space, as one Holocaust survivor remembered. The dead bodies just leaned against each other. During this time, the Germans would compete with Trawniki guards in brutality towards the people selected to die. Trawniki men were Central and Eastern European Nazi collaborators, consisting of either volunteers or recruits from prisoner of war camps, set up by Nazi Germany for Soviet Red Army soldiers captured in the border regions during Operation Barbarossa, launched in June 1941. At each gas chamber, there were 5 or 6 Germans beside the motorists with their dogs. Motorists were the Trawniki guards who operated the gas chambers. With clubs and lashes, they drove people into the corridor of the gas chambers. After the war, Jehiel Reichmann, a survivor of Treblinka, testified, "When guards didn't expect a new shipment of prisoners to arrive for several days, they would seal victims inside the gas chambers to suffocate. The victims would die by themselves. When they opened the chambers 48 hours later, all the bodies were black. Everything was one solid mass. I shudder at how it was possible to have a 2-legged animal capable of perpetrating such deeds." At the beginning, the Nazis claimed to be able to process a train of around 3,000 people in around 3 hours, later reducing this to around 30 minutes as they refined and mastered the horrors of mass genocide. Victims who were too weak or ill to reach the gas chambers on their own were told they would receive medical attention. Members of the Sonderkommando, which were groups of Jews forced to work in the crematorium, carried them to the fake infirmary known as Lazaret, of which Miete was in charge. This camouflaged area was surrounded by barbed wire fencing and disguised as a small clinic using a Red Cross flag. Once taken behind a screen, all became clear to them. Before them was a pit, 7 meters deep and surrounded by an earth bank. In the pit was a burning mass of decomposed bodies, infested with flies. The sick, elderly, and difficult prisoners were taken away from the direct view from newly arrived transports. The children of sick women and children who arrived alone on the transports were sent with them. Now, resigned to their fate, the victims walked quietly or were carried on a stretcher by the work brigade to the edge of the pit and were then shot in the back of the neck by Nazi officers such as August Miete. Miete became notorious for his cruelty, and the Jewish prisoners nicknamed him Malach HaMoves, Yiddish for the Angel of Death. He was also known as Krimme-Keppel, meaning crooked head. Miete carried out most of these killings with his own hand, aided by his subordinates. Dressed as a medic, Miete cured each one with a single pill. This is how he called firing a bullet at the nape of the neck. Miete would kill countless numbers of people, and in doing so, developed an enormous murderous energy, which was significantly disproportionate to his low rank as an SS Unterscharführer, which was equivalent to a corporal. He acted out of pure sadism, and he never once showed mercy or kindness to his victims. Miete also supervised the nearby selection square for forced labor in the camp. He would walk about checking Jewish prisoners. Those whom he deemed too sick or weak to work at the required pace were taken from the selection area to Lazaret. Miete would stand each man near a pit where a fire was constantly burning, calmly aim his gun, and shoot them. Sometimes he would instruct the victims to undress first. Miete would also search prisoners, and if he found money, food, or anything at all, he would beat them brutally before marching them to the Lazaret. In events where Miete found nothing incriminating, he would still fabricate a reason to beat the prisoner and bring them to the Lazaret. Miete also visited the living barracks and hospital room for the prisoners, where he would remove the sick and shoot them. Years later, during his trial, Miete described his own actions in testimony. There were always sick and crippled people in the transports. There were also those who had been shot and wounded en route by SS, policemen, or Latvians who guarded the transports. These ill, crippled, and wounded passengers were brought to the Lazaret by a special group of workers. Inside the Lazaret, they placed or laid these people at the edge of the pit. When all the sick and wounded had been brought, it was my job to shoot them. I fired at the nape of the neck with a 9mm pistol. Those shot would fall into the pit. The number of people shot in this way from each transport varied. Sometimes 2 or 3, and sometimes 20 or more. They included men and women, young and old, and also children. Miete was also involved in the killing of a young prisoner named Meyer Berliner from Warsaw, who had attacked SS Unterscharführer Max Biala with a knife and killed him in the process. Berliner and 2 other prisoners were immediately beaten to death. Another 10 inmates were subsequently shot on the orders of the deputy camp commander, and an additional 80 to 100 prisoners were shot the next day in retaliation. Miete also sought out victims whom Kurt Franz, the infamous commandant at Treblinka, had injured with his hunting rifle or boxing gloves or whipped beyond recognition. Miete would decide that these prisoners were too weakened from the blow sustained and no longer fit for work, so he would shoot them. If Miete spotted that prisoners were attacked by Kurt Franz's St. Bernard dog, Barry, he would approach such prisoners and execute them. After Treblinka's closure in November 1943, along with Operation Reinhard personnel, Miete was transferred to Trieste and later to Udine in Italy. Whilst there, he was involved in the confiscation and administration of Jewish property and was occasionally deployed against partisans. After the end of the war, Miete was taken prisoner by the Americans but was released near Munich after 1945. He worked in the family farming business until 1950, and then as a managing director of the Savings and Loan Association in Lotte, West Germany, until his arrest in May 1960. In September 1965, at the first Treblinka trial, Miete was charged with a joint murder of at least 300,000 people and for the personal murder of at least 9 people, which was documented in detail during the trial. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, in February 1985, he was conditionally released from prison. He would retire in Osnabrück, West Germany, into his own Tyrolean house that he bought with the money stolen from murdered Jewish prisoners at Treblinka. When Miete died on the 9th of August 1987 in Osnabrück, he was 78 years old. There were no tears shed for August Miete. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.